I invite you to live in a world where the only perception that matters is your own, because at the end of the day, the only person who experiences your life is you. What's going on, gentlemen? I'm back at it again with another video for y'all. I figured I'd go ahead and make this video while I was out during my park walk. You know, I like taking some walks sometimes, like in the morning and stuff, to kind of like clear my mind and things, whatnot. But today I wanted to come to you guys with a video, and a pretty interesting one, because I think one of the key things that we don't talk about enough when it comes to attaining success, or at least the success that we want, is this one inherent trait that I believe any successful person has, but again, isn't often spoken on, and that is forgiveness. The thing about forgiveness is, although sometimes it is for that person who's wronged you, really it's for yourself. So in today's video, I want to discuss forgiveness, what it truly means to forgive, and how you could actually use this to your advantage to become successful. Before I dive into it, do me a favor, just drop a like and a subscribe. And if you find the content valuable, consider sharing it with some of your friends and your homies. Anyway, let's get into it. So firstly, let's talk about the actual definition of forgiveness. Forgiveness involves willfully putting aside feelings of resentment towards someone who's committed a wrong, been unfair or hurtful, or otherwise harmed you in some way. Forgiveness is not merely accepting what happened or ceasing to be angry. And I like that definition. I like it personally because when I think of forgiveness, although it does mean that you are forgiving someone for what they've done to you, this also gives you a chance to let go of the past. And the reason why this plays into success is because in order to get to where you want to be, part of you transforming into the individual that is capable of being successful or capable of achieving those goals that you want has to do with being able to let go of the past. Now, for myself, I remember growing up when I was, I had rapper dreams. I had a bunch of rapper dreams that I wanted, and my parents, when I told my mom about it, my parents kind of insulted me in a way, right? Like, I'll never forget this moment. I had opened up for Meth and Redman in Starland Ballroom, and when I had opened up for them after that, I come home and I was telling my mother about it. And my mom is a Christian, rather reserved individual, and when I was mentioning it to her, she looked at me dead in the face and she was like, listen, I don't care what accomplishments you make. As far as rap is concerned, I would never take any of that money. And I'm not gonna lie, that crushed me. That crushed me as an individual, simply because when I thought about that, I thought about all the efforts I was making in order to help the family. This was right around the time my second brother passed away, and at that point in time he was making music and I was influenced by him, so I decided I would somewhat take up the mantle per se, right, and pursue that. And when she had said that to me, I felt crushed. I felt like my dreams were completely dissolved into a million pieces. Ironically enough, I found myself chasing what seemed to be the approval of my parents, and I consequently enough stopped making music. Now when I think about that, as years have gone by, I've always wanted to return to making music. I've always wanted to go back and, drop another mixtape, drop another album, and I have full intentions on doing that. From that instance, what stopped me from doing that was the fact that my parents weren't supportive of my music endeavors or my music career. So it took me some time as I got older to realize that although they might not have approved of it, that shouldn't necessarily have stopped me from making music. But moreover, being able to forgive them would actually allow me to get back on track. Now, for a lot of us, sometimes we have these dreams and these desires and these things that we want to accomplish, but we want to do that out of spite, out of something someone has done to us, or just as a revenge method, right? Like, how many of us decide to take up the mantle of so many different projects and ideas simply because we want to get back at people that might have hurt us in the past? There are a lot of examples of this, and I think we could find some in our own personal lives as well. I'm no exemption from that either. A good example of this, again, is when I used to work at Crunch, like way back in the day, like almost a decade before. I remember my manager at the time had somewhat, in some ways, insulted me as they were firing me. And since that moment on, I always had this extreme desire to make my own business and make my own fitness business, to just prove them wrong. And although one could say, like, yeah, that might be a cool idea, but the motivation behind it wasn't that forthright. Like, it wasn't smart, in other words. Doing something in spite of other people simply puts you on a path to do things that inherently you don't actually want to do. don't get me wrong, do I like doing fitness? Do I like having a fitness app? Absolutely. However, in the modality and the way I wanted to present my business at that time was simply out of spite of someone who had let me go under false pretenses. And that's normal. But the only way you can move forward is to forgive. And for all of us, especially as men, I think it's really important that we get that understanding, because relationships aside, just going through things in life is enough to make you a bitter person. But then when you start making actions, or you start building upon these things because of your bitterness, it will simply lead you down to a road of disillusion, and not only disillusion, but also it'll lead you down a road of isolation, more or less. You know, there was a long time where I had just moved out of my parents' house, and I had gotten my first apartment. And when I had moved out, you know, I hit up all my friends, I invited them to come over. They came over like once, right? They came over one time, and then from that point, I never really even seen them again. Which, again, that's fine, I suppose. But at that time, it had made me bitter, and it forced me into a point of isolation where I felt as though it wasn't even worth having friends. Now, do I still struggle to make friends, especially as I get older? In some ways. Sometimes, you know, people are simply just colleagues, and, you know, you just work with them, so you keep things amicable and you move on. But being in that position to where I was upset that I didn't have friends, and it spurned me in such a way where I decided to forget or forgo the idea of having friends, put me in a state of isolation, which isn't necessarily healthy for anybody, right? So as a guy, you might be in this position where, you know, you might have been hurt in the past, and because of that, you might feel bitter, and you might feel the need to take some sort of revenge, whether that be, you know, self-improvement revenge or relationship revenge, whatever the case may be. You have this inkling to get back at someone for hurting you. And I want to tell you right now that that's not a good idea, because that will put you on a needless duck hunt, right? An unnecessary goose chase to becoming something that inherently you don't necessarily want to be. And this happens a lot more than we'd like to admit. You know, sometimes people like to do things out of spite to prove people wrong, but it just ends up putting them on a path of self-destruction, which at the end of it doesn't really forebode well for anybody. So I think all in all, when we talk about forgiveness, we need to be able to forgive people, not because one might think it's the morally right thing to do. Personally, I think morals are subjective, although obviously I try to be a good person. But we need to forgive people beyond those reasonings. It's not just the quote-unquote moral thing to do, but also it gives you grace, and it saves you from a lifetime of resentment building up within inside of you. And then from there, it will put you on the true path and true desires of what you want, you know? And I mean, just think about it. How many times have you been either like roasted by people, made fun of, or, you know, thought less than, whatever the case may be? How many times have you thought about those things and then have charted out a plan or a course of action in order to become something, in order to just prove that person wrong? And the ironic part is, those people still might not give a fuck. Like, you might go out of your way to try and become something just to spite them based off of how they treated you, and at the end of the day, it might have been all for nothing, because they might not even care. Your life is your life, and ultimately you need to be able to live it for yourself. And when I say your life is your life and you need to live it for yourself, I simply mean really take stock at what your true desires are. What are the things that you actually want out of life? And then from there, you need to develop the plan in order to get there. You need to develop not only a plan, but a methodology, a mental framework of what it truly means to not only be the individual who is accomplishing those goals, but also the individual who is taking the necessary action steps in order to become said individual, or at the very least, live the life of said individual. Our lives are nothing more than a vapor. And although I'm not a big Bible thumper, I do think that verse alone, I'm not exactly sure where it is in the Bible, but I think that verse alone is pretty important, because it really goes to show, or it sets the stage of how quick life can be taken, right? And in the grand scheme of things, we want to live a life by our own design. People will always have ideas and perceptions of you. They will always try to dictate who you are as an individual or what you're capable of accomplishing. But you can't let those people sway you from your true desires and ultimately changing the course of your life. Because at the end of the day, unfortunately, although we'd like to seek advice from people, those people can't give us advice for our own nuanced problems. Think about it. How many times do you give people advice for some general shit that's going on, but when it comes to your own nuanced problems, it's so hard to solve? That's because we're all unique. We all come with our own sort of baggage and our own series of challenges that require some deep reflection, some deep self-reflection, and I guess you could say a type of mental clarity, the kind of mental clarity in which it allows you to have that room and ruminate on these ideas and ruminate on how to go about solving these problems and how to go about solving these issues. So all in all, at the end of the day, you have to be able to not only take stock of who you are as an individual, but also understand and be aware that you might be following a ghost when it comes to being insulted and you want to prove people wrong. It's never worth trying to prove people wrong at the end of the day. And when you truly think about it, you wanting to prove people wrong or wanting to get back or revenge or whatever the case may be is simply giving that person power. You know, like think about, for example, think about your ex-girlfriend or something. She might have cheated on you or whatever the case may be. Although those things do suck, making every single move you make from that point on about getting back at her for either cheating on you or showing her that you're a much better person than the person she cheated on you with simply gives her more power. And if anything, I'd argue gives her more validity to her claims and reasons as to why she did it, because she sensed that you were constantly seeking her approval. And that's the next thing I wanted to say. Trying to prove people wrong or prove people, you know, right, whatever the case may be, is nothing more than just trying to find acceptance and validity from these people. And that doesn't bode well either, because at the end of the day, we're all just normal fucking human beings. What is the fucking point of trying to prove yourself right to this normie anyway? What's the point? All in all, you have to live your life, and whether you are persecuted for being who you want to be, or you find confrontation in trying to do things, or you find constant berating from individuals that are close to you, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, because ironically enough, those people have their own battles that they're going through, and at some point they're going to have to answer the call to the things that they truly desire and match that up with the perception of what other people think about them. Because for those people who are very critical on others or always have something to say about what people want to do with their life, no matter how kooky it sounds, for those people, they live in a state of constant fear that they won't be able to live out their actual desires. They live in a world in where everyone's perception is more valuable than their own perception about themselves. And I invite you to not live in that world. I invite you to live in a world where the only perception that matters is your own. Because at the end of the day, the only person who experiences your life is you. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching this video. And yeah, let's have a conversation. I mean, for real guys, what do you think about forgiveness? Are you on the path to forgiving people, not for the sake of forgiving them, but for the sake of giving yourself peace and that mental freedom to be able to go ahead and chart your own desires and really go after the things that you want? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. We've got self-improvement consultation links coming out pretty soon. I haven't made a video in a minute. It's been like what, 8-9 days or something, but it's been a minute. But we'll be back to our regular scheduled program. Your boy has been busy, but I am back. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.